US President Donald Trump spelled out a tough stand on a number of issues, including the immigration policy, terror, and American domestic issues in his first State of the Union address today. The first hour of Trump's address was devoted to domestic issues, economy, tax cuts, healthcare, immigration. The majority of mention in his speech were related to that. Trump's speech moved around America First rhetoric, the plank on which he won his election.
Struggling communities, especially immigrant communities, will also be helped by immigration policies that focus on the best interests of American workers and American families. For decades, open borders have allowed drugs and gangs to pour into our most vulnerable communities. They've allowed millions of low-wage workers to compete for jobs and wages against the poorest Americans. Most tragically, they have caused the loss of many innocent lives. Here tonight are two fathers and two mothers, Evelyn Rodriguez, Freddie Cuevas, Elizabeth Alvarado, and Robert Mickens. Their two teenage daughters, Kayla Cuevas and Nisa Mickens, were close friends on Long Island. But in September 2016, on the eve of Nisa's 16th birthday, such a happy time it should have been, neither of them came home. These two precious girls were brutally murdered while walking together in their hometown. 6 members of the savage MS-13 gang have been charged with Kayla and Nisa's murders. Many of these gang members took advantage of glaring loopholes in our laws to enter the country as illegal, unaccompanied, alien minors and wound up in Kayla and Nisa's high school. Evelyn, Elizabeth, Freddie, and Robert, tonight everyone in this chamber is praying for you. Everyone in America is grieving for you. Please stand. Thank you very much.
The address was made more dramatic with the president praising individual achievers during his speech. The president mentioned soldiers who fought against ISIS in Iraq, the firefighters from California, and the victims of the drug abuse. Donald Trump also praised U.S. military for containing ISIS in Iraq and Syria and said U.S. will continue to fight the terror group until its defeat.
Perhaps someday in the future there will be a magical moment when the countries of the world will get together to eliminate their nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, we are not there yet, sadly. Last year, I also pledged that we would work with our allies to extinguish ISIS from the face of the earth. 1 year later, I am proud to report that the coalition to defeat ISIS has liberated very close to 100% of the territory just recently held by these killers in Iraq and in Syria and in other locations as well.
For an hour-long speech, Trump largely revisited his accomplishments over the last 1 year of his presidency and offered a number of proposals he would like to implement in the coming year. Trump also said he has asked the Congress to address the fundamental flaws in the Iran nuclear deal.
I am asking Congress to address the fundamental flaws in the terrible Iran nuclear deal. My administration has also imposed tough sanctions on the communist and socialist dictatorships in Cuba and Venezuela. But no regime has oppressed its own citizens more totally or brutally than the cruel dictatorship in North Korea. North Korea's reckless pursuit of nuclear missiles could very soon threaten our homeland. We are waging a campaign of maximum pressure to prevent that from ever happening. Past experience has taught us that complacency and concessions only invite aggression and provocation. I will not repeat the mistakes of past administrations that got us into this very dangerous position. We need only look at the depraved character of the North Korean regime to understand the nature of the nuclear threat it could pose to America and to our allies.
Now I'm joined by Nina Maria, WION's correspondent from Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us on WION. Fundamentally, which is the most important takeaway of the Trump speech when it comes to America?
I think there were several main takeaways. Overwhelmingly, the consensus, and this has been reflected in the reaction since he gave his first ever State of the Union address last night, has been that he tried to strike a unifying tone, which has been quite different from some of the rhetoric he's injected his first year in office with. Whether or not that unifying tone struck a chord with Democrats, I think the Democratic response in some parts was quite angry, and he didn't seem to go beyond reaching his base supporters. I don't think he did anything to add voters from his State of the Union address. The main takeaway, and you rightly played a longish clip on that, was on immigration, where he defended his administration's stance on illegal immigration. He expanded on his latest proposal for a path to citizenship for some 800,000 so-called dreamers who enjoyed protections under President Obama, protections which were just about to run out. But he remains adamant that the wall between the U.S. and Mexico needs to be built. And again, he defended his decision or call to end the visa lottery and chain migration. Again, that is something that Democrats are angry about.
Let me ask you this question. Let me put it from a different perspective. Does immigration as an issue polarizes voters for the President Trump domestically? Does it benefit him domestically in terms of his politics whenever he addresses the issue of immigration?
I think if you're asking whether or not it's gained him support, I think, again, among his base on immigration, it's a tactic that plays well to the voters that supported him throughout the election. Other issues that came up during the speech, I mean, to detract away from immigration, he made quite a robust defense of his economic policies and touted his successes on the economy. I think for ideological conservatives, the fact that he has gone some way on deregulation and tax cuts, they applaud him for that. So the economy was one area that played well as immigration. And of course, there is foreign policy. And the analysts, I think the consensus here in Washington is that it was a very tough foreign policy speech. We heard him single out Iran and Cuba and Venezuela and North Korea, obviously. But I think the overwhelming view is that what we saw last night in the State of the Union was a presidential statesman-like address that we perhaps haven't seen so much from President Trump, whose rhetoric has tended to be a lot more divisive. And on foreign policy, he came across as a president, a commander-in-chief, who won't suffer fools lightly.
Thank you very much for joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you.